Welcome to Cellar Press. This is a Takach press bed, one of the many presses that we have here. So we usually will use this for relief or monoprinting. It can be used for etching as well, but relief and monoprinting are the two processes that will mainly be used here. So one of the things to remember with monoprinting is that we like to have beveled edges. That just makes it so that there's a 45-degree angle on each edge, and that makes it so that when you're printing, it won't damage your felt blankets. We're going to use two felt blankets, and one of them is called the pusher and the other one is called the catcher. So when you're laying those down, the pusher will go first and the catcher will go on top, and that way you get a really nice impression. When we're using relief blocks or lino cuts, doesn't matter if they're type high or unbacked, we like to use a masonite board, and that is just this board here. And so we would just put that right underneath and right on top, and that gives a really nice impression and evenly distributes all the pressure. One of the most important things we want to make sure when we're operating the press is not to leave anything sharp on the press bed. So for example, if you were using a palette knife, you just don't want to set that right on the press bed, because when you're printing you might forget, and so when you run this through, it can damage the drum, and we just don't want to do that. So make sure that everything is cleared off the press bed when you're ready to print. So once you're ready to print, you want to make sure that the press drum is at the right height for whatever you're using to print. So for today, we're going to demonstrate on how to change the height for a type high linoleum block. And so to do that, you're just going to adjust these two knobs, and we want to do that at the same time if you can reach it. If not, we can move them at small intervals, each one at a time. So to raise the press drum to the height that we need, it's actually a little bit too high right now, so to lower it, we are going to go we're going to go clockwise. So I'm just going to move this down a little bit to where I think I'm going to need it. And then once I have that kind of even, I'm going to make sure that each of the numbers match up. So this one is going to be at about J7. I'm just going to walk around to the other side and make sure it's the same. That looks spot on. And then I'm just going to make sure this doesn't have any ink on it. I'm just going to get my papers together so that everything will be the same once we are printing it. So for this one, we're using a masonite block. We just want to gently place that right underneath there. And I'm going to try and run this through the press and see if it's too tight or if it's going to work for us. So that's going to be too tight because it just stopped. So I can leave everything in there, and I'm going to bring this back up, and we're going to go counterclockwise to raise it back. So I'm just going to go about a half turn, see how that works. We're going to match it up again. That's going to be at K7. The same for this side. It's almost spot on. And we're just going to try it again. And it's still a little bit too low, so we'll raise it up again. Another half turn. So we'll go to about L5. Match it up, same on this side. Try and run that through again. And that's pretty good pressure for this block. Once we've set the height for the press and we know exactly how it needs to be, we can go ahead and ink up our block. And so I've kind of already done that a little bit. I'm just going to make sure it's nice and even. And we're just going to place our block right on our paper. I'm going to flip that over. I'm going to use one piece of newsprint. This helps keep everything clean. Move that kind of towards the middle. And then we'll grab our masonite board. And remember, that's just going to make sure that all the pressure is even on the press bed. So we're going to gently tuck that right underneath. We're going to hold everything down, keep it in place. And set that down gently. And then you can go ahead and run it through the press. all the way through. We're going to take our Masonite board right off. Set that off to the side. And then we can take off our paper. And then there's our print. So now that we've demonstrated relief printing, we're going to demonstrate how to print monoprinting. So we had this set up really high before, so we brought it down a little bit. We're just going to make those fine-tune adjustments now. So for monoprinting, we're actually going to be using some felt blankets. And so we have two of those. One of them is called a catcher and one is the pusher. And the catcher, that's this one here, that one's going to be in closer contact with your printing matrix. So that one's going to go first and then the pusher is going to be on top. And so we're just going to gently slide this right under the press drum so it's nice and tucked. You can even pull the press bed out a little bit just to make sure we've got that nice and tucked in there. And we've got our mono plate right under here. We're going to put it about midway through. And I'm going to just double check that this is where I want it to be. And that is just a little bit too high. So I'm going to bring this back down. Again, to bring it down, we're going to be going counterclockwise. And go right about there. Make sure that they're matched up. And I'm at 7.5, B 7.5. Just double checking those match. And I'm just going to run that through. And that seems to be a good pressure. So then I can bring this back out. We're going to leave some of the tail of the blanket tucked in. And then we can just fold it right back over. And then we're ready to print. So once we've got the height set and our blankets nice and tucked in, we're ready to print. And so I've went ahead and inked up this plate right here already. And I'm just going to make sure that my edges are clean. So I'm just going to take a nice little rag and run right over those beveled edges. So that should be good. I'm just going to get this nice and centered where I want it. And we'll place our paper down. And then we'll put a nice backing paper too, just to make sure no ink passes through. And we'll take those blankets and lay them right on top of that. We can hold all of our stuff down just to make sure it doesn't shift. Lay those out nicely. And then making sure to keep our fingers away from the drum, we're just going to hold that in place, run it through. And that is a little bit too tight, so we are just going to come up a little bit. We did add some extra things in there, so we'll just come up. I'm just going to move these by themselves, just because it's so tight. I'm going to come up and go to about C0. Just going to make sure this one is the same on the side. We'll see if that's good. That seems to be a pretty good pressure. Run it all the way through. We can leave the blankets on the side, that's totally fine. We're just going to flip them right back up over the other side. Right, you can take care of our backing paper. And then we're just going to gently lift. And then we've got our monoprint.